This show is sponsored by Sevi, answering all your commercial real estate needs. Sevi is the first commercial real estate company committed to the 4 C's: commercial real estate, community, content, and culture. Go visit Sevi at Sevi, SEVI, properties.com. Again, SeviProperties.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today I have a very special guest for you. I have Patricia McGann. Patricia is the author of Steadfast Parenting. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Otto.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you. If people don't know Steadfast Parenting, I know it's a new book that's about to be released here in a couple days. If you could just give us an idea what's the book about and how the book came about to be.
Sure. The book is organized from toddler age through teenage years, and it's a book of guidance and encouragement for parents as they travel that journey with their children. I wrote the book because after my years in education and raising my own family and having grandchildren, I can see that there are a lot of demands on parents created by their work, technology, this drive for children to achieve, and parents can lose sight of the most essential relationship they have, and that is with their child.
That's very true. I'm going to be taking notes here since I have 3 young children, all under 13.
Oh, wow. So you have your hands full.
I do. Yeah, 3 boys. I sure do.
Yes.
Yes, that's great. You mentioned, you were in education and all that. I can't wait to get into all this and what led you to actually write the book. But before that, I'd like the audience to get to know you personally a little bit better. Are you originally here from the DMV area?
I spent most of my childhood, from the time I was about 10, I lived right at Tenley Circle in the district and went to school here and have been here all except for a few years we spent in South Bend, Indiana, when my husband was in law school and I was in nursing school up there.
Oh, lovely.
So that we've been here.
So you grew up in, I guess, the DC side of the border,
DC.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
DC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I went to middle school, Alice Deal Junior High School.
Oh, yeah. Right down the street from my house.
That is right there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you attend there or no?
No, I went to St. Anne's.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. So growing up in the city, do you remember back then when you were a child, what were you into? What did you like?
Oh my gosh. I often think about that because we were so much freer.
Yes.
When I was a child. I was just talking to a friend the other day about how we used to ride the bus downtown and go to Shoals Cafeteria and go Christmas shopping at Heck Company and Woodward and Lothrop in downtown. And our parents never worried about us. We were not afraid to travel on our own. We loved going to sporting events as kids, and we just kind of went everywhere on foot. It seems like nobody drove us anywhere, but I was from a big family. I was from a family of 13.
Oh, wow.
So my parents didn't have a lot of time to drive us anywhere.
That's a lot of siblings. How was it growing up in that house?
It was great. We were a blended family. My mom was a widow and my stepdad was a widower. And so it was 2 families joined together, and then they had 2 more. So,
okay.
yeah.
It must have been never a dull moment, always fun in the house.
Never dull. The good thing about it was you could get lost every once in a while and nobody would notice, which was kind of nice.
That is true. It's funny you mentioned as far as taking the bus. Sometimes I talk to my children and I tell them how in elementary school I would take the Metro bus and I would just be in the city in DC and going to elementary school or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And they would be this shock in their face. They're like, oh my gosh. And it's funny because when we go into the city and we go to some events and we take the Metro train there, and they're always, they don't ride it that often, living in the suburbs, it's always a shock, but it's a different time now than before. Definitely. Yeah. So you mentioned you were nursing. So did you finish that? Because you also said education.
Right. I started out as a psychiatric nurse. I graduated from Georgetown And then, so I did that for a while. And then I started having my children. So I didn't work for a little while, was stay-at-home mom. And then I taught physical education for a little while because the school where my kids went, the teacher left and they didn't have a teacher. So I said I'd do it. And then I went back to school and got a master's in counseling. And so I did that for a while with the Montgomery County Commission for Women. I worked with women who were going through divorce.
Okay.
And then somehow just fell into a job in education. I worked at a girls' high school as an administrator and then moved to a small elementary school in Bethesda where I was the principal for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of your career was into education.
Yes, about 20 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is that what prompted you to write this book?
Well, certainly working with parents when I was working in the schools really showed me that a lot of parents don't have the guidance, I think, that maybe earlier generations had. They don't live down the street or around the corner from their own parents. And so they feel isolated sometimes. And when they're facing challenges, there's not a lot of places they can go. They're busy working and, driving their kids to activities. And sometimes it can be very lonely, especially if your child is struggling with something. And so I found that parents were able to talk to me and I didn't tell them what to do, but I helped them figure out what to do.
Sure. So they were going to you. Go ahead.
That sort of prompted me to write a weekly newsletter to the parents while I was the administrator at the school. And those newsletters sort of formed the foundation for the book.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Is that newsletter still live and active or?
No, I don't write that anymore. I do write articles for a local Catholic newspaper that comes out every month or so.
Okay. Also parenting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you were writing these newsletters, was it email or was it physical as far as paper or?
Well, when we started, it was on paper.
Okay.
And it went just to the families. But then when it turned into email, it spread a little more than that because families would email it to their own families who were far away or to their friends. And so it grew that way.
Do you remember what did it grow up to? How many members or?
Well, I don't know because people didn't tell me where they were sending it. I would just hear from people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you must have been writing some good things there.
Well, I think a lot of it was real practical.
Okay.
And just seeing the things that people were going through. Most of it was it was very normal stuff, but sometimes people just need to have some direction a little bit when you're going through that. Maybe a child who was struggling to behave in school or maybe being disrespectful at home or feeling like he didn't have any friends, those kinds of things.
So when you mentioned this as far as having not many friends or disrespectful, you would go into as far as what the parent can do in scenarios like this?
It was mostly for parents, what they might try.
Okay.
Or what happened to me when those things happened to me, what I did. What I
Um,
did wrong, what I did right. Yes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, these are all great topics. So if there is a child there who might not have a lot of friends in that
Mhm.
situation,
Yeah.
what did you do or what would you recommend?
Well, I think a lot of times parents, some kids like to travel light. So some kids don't need a lot of friends. And I think sometimes we want our children to be so popular and we want them to be in the cool group and all of that. And really, some children prefer to have one or two really good friends. And then they like their alone time and they're quieter children. Not everybody has to be actively engaged with all the other children in the class. And I think sometimes parents are looking for their child to fulfill some need they have that way. But if your child complains that he or she is lonely, then certainly you would want to find out what they mean by that.
Hmm.
Because a child could be lonely and have lots of friends. just not feel connected to anybody. But if he says, I don't have any friends, nobody likes me, then we kind of have to look at, let's find out what you're doing that might be pushing people away.
Mm-hmm.
Do you try and join the game? And if you do, what happens? Sometimes children push too hard, sometimes they withdraw too quickly, all those kinds of things. And if it was a parent of a child in the school, I could watch the child on the playground and in the classroom and see what I saw, and then give the parent more advice that way.
That's very true. Would you notice in your experience, Patricia, that, well, I'm sure it is, and I'm seeing it firsthand because I have three boys, so I only know the life of boys, right? But I can just observe from just neighbors, and then they have girls, and it's just so different though, the way the girls communicate, the way they mature, and whether they're similar in age or not.
It's very different. I had 4 boys.
Oh, wow.
And then I
Okay.
had a daughter at the
Okay.
end. But I know what you mean about the difference. It's very clear, especially as children get up into those middle grades, like fourth, fifth, and up. There's a huge difference with the way they communicate. You know, the girls, if you look at a school playground, for example, the boys need a lot of space. They need to be moving and they need a lot of space, whether they're by themselves or in a group. They just need space. The girls, on the other hand, will be clumped in the corner, touching one another, maybe sitting and talking very quietly. They establish their hierarchies much sooner. The boys are basically clueless about those hierarchies. But the girls do a lot of their communication, and a lot of their aggression or their kindness is done using words, where boys are much more physical,
Hmm.
as you well know.
Yes.
And that's how they communicate. But their aggression disappears as soon as they knock somebody over in the soccer game. They move on. The girls hold on to those things.
Oh, they do.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
The parenting book, there's a lot of parenting books out there, but I'm sure there's a difference from yours compared to what else is out there in the marketplace, right?
I like to think so. I think the first thing I think of when I think of the difference is that there is no magic formula. There's no here's what you do to get a doctor, or here's what you do to have happy children. There's not a formula for that. There's not a trick for that. It's more about the process in this book. It's about the day-to-day things. It's about trusting yourself to know your child and then to adapt to your child. Not if you say these 3 things, your child will have self-confidence, or if you do these things. It's not, it doesn't work that way, because every child is unique and every parent is unique. So
Hmm.
this book is way more about encouraging parents to enjoy the process of growing their children. And of course, it is told from a grandmother's perspective and an educator's perspective and a mother's perspective. So that's a little bit different. Um, I like to think that it's much more of a companion than it is a how-to book.
What are things that parents can do to actually enjoy the process?
They can step back from their devices.
The
They can,
parent.
yes,
Okay.
and they can not bring their work home. They can leave their work in whatever room it's in at their own house, or they can leave it at their work and not answer those emails. And they can really slow down. Just take a minute and see what's happening, because your conversation with your son as you walk to the corner to get something at the 7-Eleven could be the most important part of his day. And it might not be a very important subject. It might just be casual conversation, but to him, it's huge. And you'd be surprised. That will be the kind of thing he'll remember as he gets older. You don't have to go on magic trips or, do all kinds of wonderful activities. You have to spend time with your kids.
That's so true. It just reminds me, sometimes when I have a full day of work and I go for dinner, and then we're there with the whole family, the 5 of
Mhm.
us, and depending how my day is, they might do something, and just like that, it just not sets me off, but just depending how my day went, my reaction could be very different day to day. And like
Mhm.
I talked with my wife about it, and I'm like, I need to sort of step back
Mhm.
and just sort of be there in the moment and
Mhm.
just bring it down.
Right. It's hard to do that though. So you almost have to give yourself, you have to almost have to create a space for yourself so that when you're finished working, you have whatever time it takes for you to come down and say, now it's family time. It's not
Hmm.
that work time. You're not a robot, so you can't just switch over. But the other thing is, I was talking to a mom the other day, and she said, I felt so badly because my son heard me complaining to my husband about work. And my son said, why are you complaining so much about work? And she said, and I felt so badly that he heard me being so negative. And I said, but everybody has a bad day. So if you were having a bad day at work and talking to your husband about it, you could say to your son, when I have a bad day, it's really important for me to have somebody I can talk to about it. And your dad is the perfect person for that because he doesn't fix it for me. He just listens. And we all have bad days. And now I'm not going to do that as much because your dad helped me figure out a solution. But kids need to know that work's hard, but they shouldn't think that you hate it. So
Hmm.
it's you can explain away. And even if something touches you wrong when you're with the family and you lose your temper or you snap at somebody, you can explain why. Because they have days like that too,
Yeah. And it's
right?
so true. You just said right now, Patricia, as far as, your dad is just there to listen. And I think us as humans, sometimes we listen and we're there at the moment, but we also, and I find to myself, even whether I'm talking to my child or even just to another adult, and they might be sort of venting or complaining or whatever. And then as a human being, you try to find solutions to help and you want to be helpful. And
Yeah,
sometimes they don't want your advice.
no.
They just want your ear, I guess, right?
Yeah, they just want you to be with them while they're struggling. And as parents, we have a tendency to really want to fix it for our kids. you know, uh, Somebody is mean to our child and we go charging into the school and that child should be expelled. He's a bully and all of that stuff. And our kids have already forgotten about it, or they've moved on and they're friends again.
Hmm.
So we have to be careful that we don't try and control everything in their lives because if we do, we're telling them they're not capable. And
Yes.
that's dangerous because then they think, well, okay, if I'm not capable of handling it, my parents will do that. They never learn how to plan for anything. They never learn how to handle a situation that gets tricky because we're going to step in and do it. And you often hear women say that their husbands always want to fix things when they complain to their husbands. I think it goes both ways. I think we all have to sort of just be with people when they're venting like that.
Yeah. You were just saying as far as letting the child be independent, how when a parent is having difficulties of I guess letting go and giving them the room needed to for them to develop on their own as well,
Mhm.
what can you do as far as giving them that independence or developing that character?
Yeah, it's tricky because if your child is talking to you about a problem they're having, the first instinct, at least mine always was, well, that's that other child's problem, or they should be doing something, or here's what you should do. But if you can hold back and say, what do you think you can do about this? Or what do you need me to do or say to help you
Hmm.
get through this? Do you want to try and make a plan? Do you want to do you want to go talk to your teacher if it's a problem with the teacher? How do you think you can approach this? In other words, handing it back to them in that I know this is your issue, but I'm also here for you if it's not going to work or if you don't know which way to go. Most of the time, kids know. Most of the time, they know. We don't give them a chance to tell us because we want to fix it. I know I did that way too much when my kids were little. Now, as they got older, I realized what I was doing, so I stopped. And then they actually became pretty independent and pretty capable.
What are you doing now, Patricia, as a grandparent,
Mhm.
differently that you were as a parent?
I think the thing I'm doing now that is so awesome being a grandparent is that I am taking the time. I don't feel rushed. You know, when I'm around my grandkids, and there are 15 of them, and the oldest is 10, so there are a lot of little ones. But I laugh when they do stuff that when I was a mother, I wouldn't have laughed at, I can tell you. So, but I do appreciate those moments where I can just sit and watch them play, or we can take a walk, and I see how valuable they are. And I often say to myself, why was I in such a hurry? Because they grow up so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. And even now, I look at myself observing my parents, and I'm like, why? They're like two totally different individuals now compared to how they raised me and I was growing up in the household. It's not night and day per se, but very different. Obviously, they're older, but besides them being more patient,
Mhm.
just like you said, very different.
Yeah. It's, as a grandparent, it's such a wonderful feeling to see your children raising good children. I mean, it's such a gift to be able to see that. And I'm sure your parents are looking at your boys and saying, wow, isn't this the greatest thing ever? You know, and laughing when they do silly stuff that you don't think is so cute, but enjoying all of that and having the patience, like you said. But as a, that's a gift that grandparents have. On the other hand, parents can steal some of that and say, wow, I'm going to try and really take those moments and be in those moments more often than I am now,
Yeah.
knowing that you have all kinds of other things interfering in your life.
That's so true. It's because a lot of time as a parent, we're just not rushing, but taking it from this event or this practice or this activity or
Right,
school.
right,
And you just have to step back and just be
yeah,
there in the moment.
right. As you talk about taking kids to the different activities, there's nothing better for boys than riding in the car for a good conversation because they don't have to look at you. So it's a great time to have those more serious conversations with your boys because they're so much more comfortable if you're not looking them in the face when you're talking about important things.
Why is that?
I think there again, it's that difference between girls and boys. Girls want to get up close and they want to read your facial language and all of that. And boys would much rather talk about it, but not have to see how you're reacting to it because they're afraid you'll overreact or you'll make a face. And if all you have to do is make one face and they're done, they're
Okay.
not going to tell you what they think about something. So it's a great opportunity when you're driving one of your boys somewhere to just bring up anything that's important to you, maybe some lessons you learned, some talk about your values at certain things. Ask them, what were the three best things that happened to you today? Or tell them, I had a rough situation at work today. I had a problem with a coworker and I had to work it out. And at the end of it, we ended up laughing because it wasn't that big a deal. Or something that you made a mistake with and laughing at yourself about it, letting them hear that and then leaving it because they will be able to relate and then maybe tell you something that happened.
No, now that you mentioned this, Patricia, it's so true, and I never thought about it just because, for example, today, perfect example, this morning, I'm driving, it's just me and the three of them, the three boys, and I'm driving them to camp. And that's when we just, they're goofing off, talking about some video games and different levels, whatever they may be. But then I chime in with other things and I ask them, and it's a very nice conversation that I typically don't have at home
Mhm.
or when mom is around at home, right?
Right, right.
And even if it was just me, but I know once my wife's in there, very different.
Very different.
Very different. That conversation would be very different. Or even like when I would go on walks with them and it's just one on one, me and one of them, or me and two or three. But again, my wife's not present, it's just me and one, or it's
Uh-huh.
just And we're not looking at each other because we're just facing forward and
Right.
we're just walking right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. And we talk about school or whatever practice or event that they're in. And it's nice. That's why I would love with my little one who just turned 8 this month. Sometimes we would just walk to school, just me and him hold hands, and we would talk
Yeah.
about cartoons or some
Yeah.
dream or something he
Yeah.
saw on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's just those little moments that
Yeah.
that I cherish that we don't have at home that much.
Yeah. You cherish them, but he does too. You know, he's learning how to be a compassionate man, a listening man, a kind man, just from going with you on those walks. And as they get older, you know, you can say, what kind of coach do you think he is? Do you think he motivates the players with that? You know, deeper conversations. If you were coaching your team, how would you handle those situations? Those kinds of things. You'd be amazed at how much your children think about those things, and nobody ever asks them their opinions. But you can take that opportunity in the car, and because soon they'll be driving themselves, and then you won't have it.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
be out of the picture.
Yep. They don't want to take you along.
Yeah, but it's true. Even my middle child, he finished basketball season a couple months back, and he had two different coaches because one of them had a fly or something. And then towards the end, his coach, which was the assistant coach, switched to the head coach, and they went to the playoffs and they actually won the
Oh,
championships. And
wow.
they
Yeah.
didn't have the best record, and no one thought that here a team that wasn't doing so during the regular season in basketball ended up winning the championship. And I asked him, I'm like, Adam, what is it that you think made you guys win the whole championship? And he was like, I really like this last coach. Nothing wrong with the coach previous,
Yeah.
but he was just more motivating, more uplifting, even if maybe they missed a shot. He was like, okay, it's okay, guys, you got it, the next one. And
Yeah.
just cheering them on. And it was just a much more positive, and you can feel it. Even as a parent, I would be on the
Yeah.
sidelines observing very different coaching style.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously it translated in the court and they won the championship.
Right. Right. And he was insightful enough to know that there was that difference, because you know, had you asked him that sitting across the table from him, he might have said, I don't know. I guess we just got lucky or whatever.
Hmm.
But because he had an opportunity to think about it and talk about it, it'll teach him something. Someday he'll be a coach or a dad.
Yeah.
He'll know that that works.
Is it something with maybe boys that I guess when you're having a conversation, whether one-on-one with them, now that we're talking about it, just makes me think that I have sort of more deeper and almost meaningful conversations when we're doing something, like you said, maybe we're
Yes.
riding somewhere or we're just walking alone instead of just sitting on his bed or on the couch
Yeah.
and just talking.
Yeah. Or if you're working in the yard, or if you're working on a project of some kind, cleaning the basement, whatever it is, it's much easier for boys to talk then.
It's like we
It's
have to
much,
be doing something, some
yes,
activity.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Physically, it's just much better for them. Where girls could sit for an hour and snuggle on the bed and talk about all kinds of things, not boys.
You know, that never leaves us because it just reminds me of a conversation I had with my wife a while ago. She can go out with her girlfriends and go out for a drink or something, or just go over to someone's house and just chat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. She's like, why don't you do that with your friends? I'm like, oh,
No,
nah, it's okay. I don't need that.
we don't do
Um,
that. That's funny. Yeah, guys don't do
she
that.
tries to push me out the door to be more social, she says. And I'm like, no. I'm like, if you guys want to do double dates or something, but maybe we can go do something like
Yeah,
axe throwing or mini
right,
golf, or
right.
I want to be
Roller
also,
skating.
yeah, like we can chat and eat
Yeah,
or talk, but
yeah,
just, yeah, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Everyone's different, I guess.
right. But I do think that's a sort of a commonality, and it doesn't really go away. You don't grow out of it, which is fine because we get to be different, right?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
yeah.
Have you noticed that, and as far as now with the children compared to back then, there's maybe more anxiety, there's less attention,
Mhm,
or more depression in
mhm.
today's children?
Yes. I think I just saw a statistic the other day that girls between the ages of 8 and 12, that rate of anxiety and depression has gone through the roof in the last couple of years, which is very interesting. But I think when it comes to anxiety, I think we have to be clear that there's a difference between anxiety and stress. We all experience stress, and stress can be a good thing for kids. Stress before the game will make us play maybe a little bit harder. Stress before a test will make us focus a little bit more. There's a lot of good stress that we have, but when stress becomes overwhelming or causes us to be in fear of something or dreading something, then it's anxiety. Then there is a difference. And there is, during the pandemic, those of us who were our parents, grandparents, discovered that we could not protect our families from everything. And we became anxious. Adults became anxious, and anxious parents make for anxious children. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
And so as parents and grandparents, we have to learn to deal with our own anxiety separate from our children and not communicate it to our children. And that can be very difficult, but it's also very important because our children are already inundated with visual images. If you just think about the last month on the television, on the radio, on the news, on YouTube, we saw a former president get shot right in front of the whole world. We saw people talking about the current president saying he was impaired, he was senile, all of those things. What's going to happen in the world? Our children were wondering what is happening. And then the violence in this world, they see it all the time. So they have good reason to be anxious. And then they get involved with social media. And they participate in fake relationships. They're friends with people that they don't know. They participate in fake communication, letters and codes and all the other things. And they see images that create in them a sense that they're not meeting up. They're not as good as everybody else. And so the level, and that is exhausting because it never goes away. Kids have devices at school. They have devices when they get home. They have devices during dinner. They have devices during homework. And many of them are on devices into the dark hours of the night. They're exhausted. And so then when they go to school, they don't know how to relate to people in person. They don't know how to do their schoolwork because they're exhausted and they feel like a failure. And that's what leads them to depression. So our children are bombarded with these negative influences. And as parents, we have to first try and eliminate some of that and not share with them all of the bad news in the world, because there's also a lot of good news in the world. Let them watch the Olympics, for heaven's sake. Then they can see people overcoming tremendous obstacles and being successful, or if they're not, being okay about it. But the news, they shouldn't be watching the news. And if parents could be brave enough to take those devices away and limit the amount of time their children are on them, I think they would be doing them a huge service.
Speaking of device, yes, go
Pardon?
ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Dealing with the anxiety when children have it is another whole ball of wax. I mean, you really have to see it for what it is and then deal with it depending on the intensity of it.
Speaking of devices, that's what I was going to ask you, Patricia. What do you recommend as far as limiting or, I guess, taking it away during certain times of the day?
Well, what I would recommend is probably something you're going to say, she's out of her mind. They don't need it. Okay. They don't need to have a cell phone. They really don't. If they're at school and you think they need a cell phone, why do they need a cell phone? And many moms will say, well, if there's an emergency or if something awful happens, I'll want them to be able to get in touch with me. Well, the school will get in touch with you because the school has communication techniques. So The only thing that might happen is that they might get their feelings hurt and go in the bathroom and call you and say, Johnny's picking on me. Or I need you to pick me up right after school, or I want to come home sick. All of those things are inappropriate. Children shouldn't be doing that. Or I left my lunch home. Instead of having to deal with it themselves because they're in school. If you're school age, you should be able to deal with that. You should be able to tell somebody, borrow something, ask your friend to share her lunch. So they don't need them in school. And I know some schools are trying to get rid of cell phones, and I think it's a great idea. The school where I worked, we had a basket in the front hall because we had some kids who took the metro to school. So they would leave their phones in the basket at the front hall, and they were not to use those phones until they got off the school grounds. But also, of course, we did tell parents they couldn't use their phones when they were in the school or in the school parking lot because they didn't need to. You don't need them then. And they cut you off from people. But the devices at home, I think there's a whole segment of young people that we haven't really even talked much about. And those are young people, and usually it's boys who are playing video games a lot, and to the detriment of socializing or participating in sports or going outside or engaging with their parents or their family members. The people who create those games are brilliant, and they create them so that children will keep playing them. And so it's always one more step, one more level, and taking the device away from a child like that, if that child gets upset or angry or keeps arguing over and over and over, I need it, that's an addicted child. There is a disorder now named for gaming, and many children have it. As a principal at a school, when kids came back from long vacations or long weekends, we knew exactly which children were on their devices the whole weekend because they were touchy, they were jumpy, they had tonic neck syndrome. We had several children who had diagnosed with tonic neck syndrome from looking down at their devices for so long. And they were chronically absent because they would say they were sick, they had to go home. They couldn't focus in school because it wasn't that constant stimulation. There's a lot that goes into these devices, and the people who created them are brilliant because they're trying to get us addicted, and we all are. Let's face it, we all are. We all have trouble putting them down. If parents could put their own down, if they could agree that 5 o'clock, we're putting them all away. Think how much time you'd have with no emails, no texts, no looking on YouTube, no LinkedIn, nothing after 5 o'clock. Imagine how much time you'd have. You could play games, board games, cards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. So with the child that comes home and plays video games or some type of game, do you recommend the parent no games at all or limit it to a certain time?
Well, I think parents, you got to know your children. I think I would say that most children, when they get home from school, they need at least 30 minutes of downtime. And so in the old days, I used to let my kids watch TV for 30 minutes when they got home from school because they had practices if they were on teams and they had homework and there was a lot to do, but they really needed, and I know this sounds, I think boys in particular, because when boys are in school, much of the day, they're expected to act like girls. Sit in your seat, raise your hand, don't move around. All of those things are difficult for boys. And then they take away their recess because they act up in class. But so I think every kid needs 30 minutes. And if it's 30 minutes playing a video game and eating a snack, that's not going to hurt them. If they can give it up in 30 minutes, or if it's 30 minutes watching a show on TV or whatever it is, laying on their bed and daydreaming. I don't think you can say, well, the video game's not hurting them then. It's allowing them to come down. Now, if they come home and they get on social media for 30 minutes, then it just continues to bombard them. They don't need that. They don't need YouTube. They need time away from that stuff. But no, I don't think you have to say they can never play a video game, but I think it has to be so controlled. And then they get up and they go outside, or they go to practice, or they do their homework and then they go to practice, or they go outside. Kids have to move around, especially because they've been sitting all day. Our schools are getting better, but still kids most of the day are sitting. And that's really tough for growing kids. They should be moving around more.
That's very true.
Yeah.
We were, before video games, we were also talking about cell phone and how you feel it's not needed. I actually agree with you. Do you think there's a certain age, maybe then the parent may consider maybe getting a cell phone for the child?
I think when kids are driving, you want them to have a cell phone.
Okay, so 16 plus.
Yeah, because
Okay.
if something happens and you need to get them or they need to get you, then they should have a phone. On the other hand, you got to really talk to them about not using it when they're driving.
Of course, that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, if you drive anywhere, you look over and kids are driving with their heads down, and they have no idea what's happening in front of them. But I do think once they're driving, they need a cell phone. And if they take public transportation, they need a cell phone. If they're on the subway or something and something happens, then they should have a phone. But again, they don't have to have all the other stuff that goes with a phone. Flip phones are coming back in.
They are.
No, there's no email on those or any of that other stuff. That's not such a bad thing.
Yeah. No, it's very true. My oldest, who's 13, I think when he went into middle school, we got him a phone. And I still do not believe he needs a phone right now. And I always tell him, I was like, you know what? I got a phone when I was able to pay my phone bill. I was, I think, 18, almost graduating college, about to go to, no, not graduating college, but graduating high school, going to college around. That's when I got my first cell phone, and I was paying my monthly bill. It was under my plan. I was never under mom and dad's plan. They never gave me a phone.
Yeah.
And I was like, you don't need a phone. I asked him, like, what do you need a phone for? Entertainment. The phone is not there to entertain you, buddy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think it's part of it is that we're so afraid our kids are going to miss out that we let them do things that instinctively we know are not a good idea. It's kind of like when they get older and they want to go to parties at somebody's house and you're not real comfortable with the way those parents run their house, or you're not real sure about what could be happening there. But we say yes because we're afraid they'll be left out. And you don't want your kids left out. You don't want them, or what if everybody's texting about something and he doesn't know about it because he doesn't have a phone, and they're all like, well, you don't have a phone. Worrying about our kids being left out can lead us to making poor decisions when it comes to those kinds of things.
Oh, I can care less about that. It was more my wife and her. Well, what if something happens to him when he rides his bicycle to school or something? Well, I'm sure there's going to be someone there on the road who's going to see him.
Yeah,
they have a cell phone. Other people more than likely have a
Yeah.
cell phone. There's a
Yeah.
school that's a couple blocks away. He
Yeah.
can drag himself, worst case scenario, to school.
Exactly.
I'm still in disagreement that he does not need a cell phone at this age, but everyone does not agree, right? If not, what kind of world would we be in?
Yeah, and you have to figure it out in your own house how it works. And then when kids get home, then they certainly don't need a cell phone because you're right there. So if it's a safety issue, you're right there. So there's really no reason for it after that.
Yeah, that's true. But it's true about being left out, because my oldest one, the only one who has a cell phone, tells me, he's like, oh, Dad, like all these people in my school, everyone has TikTok. He's not allowed to download any apps on his phone. So no Instagram or TikTok. I think he only has YouTube, but he just watches video people playing video games, that's what he watches. So he says he learns what to do and then he goes and applies it when he plays his video games.
Uh,
But it is left out because everyone in school, everyone supposedly has
right,
TikTok.
right.
He does not. People
Yeah,
think he does, but it's really just YouTube or YouTube
yeah,
Shorts that he watches.
yeah,
But there is that I'm going to be missing out or be left out of the group type
yeah.
of thing.
And when kids say everyone, I mean, I remember saying that to my parents. Everyone's going there. Everyone's
That's
doing
true.
that.
That's
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
yeah, not everyone. And there are other kids like him who are saying they have it or pretending they have it because they don't have it and they don't want to feel left out. But if you can convince him that it's a waste of time, I don't want to waste my time on TikTok, then he can say that to his friends. I don't want to waste my time on that. I got better things to do. Who's going to argue with that?
Hmm.
Right?
That's
I
true.
mean, sometimes we have to equip our kids with taglines that they can use. If somebody gives them a hard time for not having TikTok or whatever, or Instagram, you know.
Do you have taglines in the book or no?
There's some, yes, there's some,
Okay.
yeah, there's actually some in there for pretty much for the being left out, those kinds of things, and for bullying and those responses to bullying and things like that. Yeah, there's some in there.
Speaking
Yeah.
about bullying, I'm glad you just mentioned that. If someone is having that in school,
Mhm.
any advice as far as what they should do?
Well, I think it's, when parents hear that and it's so scary. Because first of all, you don't want our children spend a lot of time in school, right? It's like,
Hmm.
is it 1,200 hours a year or something? It's 181 days out of the year, they're in school. So if you think about that, that's a lot of their time, 8 hours every day, right? And if someone's being bullied, and you know about it as their parent, you really have to think, okay, first of all, you have to give them permission and a wide berth to tell you everything about it and not say a word. Because if you jump in and say, you should do this, you should ignore it, you should tell, I'm going to go do something about it, then they're not going to tell you anymore.
Hmm.
They have to be able to really say all of it. And you have to be able to tolerate it, even if it breaks your heart, right? Because you're not going to fix the bully. So don't spend any energy on the other kid. You're not going to fix the bully. All you can do is deal with your own child. And telling your child to ignore it, of course, he's probably already tried that. That's not going to help. That just gives the bully more room. We want the bully to move away from him, right? So he has to have some taglines. And there's a few in there, but focusing on your child and not the child who's doing the bullying. Now, if your child's being physically hurt or threatened, then you have to tell the school authorities. They have to know. That's when you find out what kind of school your kid's in. Because if they don't do anything about it, then you know you're in the wrong school. I mean, it's as
Yeah.
simple as that. Because it shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be tolerated in any way, shape, or form. But your focus needs to be on your own child, and looking at your child realistically and saying, okay, I want my child to be the person he is. I don't want to tell him to stop wearing those goofy clothes and then nobody will tease you, or, stop growing your hair so long and then nobody will tease you. Let him be who he is and give him some tools, some things to say or things to do when someone's making fun of him. And I think it's a parent's job to help him equip and then let him rehearse it. If somebody says this, what would you say? What do you think you could say? What have you tried? Again, sort of handing it back to him, but letting him know you're in this with him. It's really important. It breaks your heart to think that someone would be bullying your child. And usually when you find out about it, it's been going on for a while. Because kids don't usually tell right away.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any principles, Patricia, that we should teach our kids that maybe you outline in your book?
I do have a long, long list of principles in the back of the book. I but to pull out a couple of them that I think are really important. One of them is maybe not something that people think about a lot, but I think is really important. And maybe because personally, I think it's very important. Of my 5 children, my second son was brain injured as a baby. And so he is physically very impaired. He's in a power wheelchair, and his body was devastated by this brain injury. But anyway, so it means a lot to me because I think I've seen how it can change children's perspective when they recognize that there are people in the world who are really struggling, not struggling because they can't have this or because they can't have that, but really struggling, either financially or emotionally or physically, but they keep going and they keep trying. And those people get up every day and try and make it a good day. And if our kids can learn that lesson from those people, and if they can acknowledge that there are those people, and so if you see someone who looks like they really struggle, pointing it out to your children that, wow, now that's somebody who's got a lot of courage and a lot of persistence, because look, he got up and came out today, even if he is standing on the corner asking for quarters. Or if you see somebody that you know was sleeping at the bus stop last night, but now he's up and he's moving around, at least he's doing that, right? I think it's really important for our kids to see that any hardships we face, we can be determined, we can be persistent, and we can keep going. We can learn something from those people. Another lesson that I think is really important for parents to teach is the stand-up lesson. You stand up for yourself, but you also stand up for what you believe in, and you're not shy about what you believe in. You don't have to put it in people's faces, but if you believe certain things and other people are, for example, what if you believe that the little boy next door is just a nice friend and your friends are making fun of him? Then you should stand up for him. You should say, he's a nice guy. You just don't know him very well. And then standing up for that little guy, because there are always kids, especially as you kids get older, and those middle grades and then high school, who are left out. They're outside the circle for some reason. And to stand back a little bit and include those people, if kids can learn to do that, they can change the other person's life, but they can also change their own. Just to learn that. And one other one I really think is important, in that we have to teach our kids this from the time they are toddlers, and that is that good people can make poor choices. But you should never be defined by your worst day or your worst hour or your worst 5 minutes. You know, when our toddlers are little and they make mistakes, oh, you bad boy, you shouldn't do that. We don't want to say that. He made a mistake. He's 4. He's not supposed to know how to do things yet, right? But as young people get older and they do make mistakes, it's what you do with it and after it that determines who you are, not you in that moment. And I worked with a wonderful man who for many years we ran the school together. And the one thing he taught me to say, and I said more times than I can count, when classes misbehaved or students misbehaved, you're better than this. You're better than this. We're going to move on and you're going to be better, because this is not who you are. And if we can teach our kids that, they can bounce back from pretty much anything.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. How was the process of writing the book? Was it what you thought? Was it fast? Did it take you longer than expected?
You know, the writing of it, the original writing, it didn't take me, it took a long time, but I kind of thought it would. And I enjoyed it so much. I loved doing it. But the process working with an editor was painful. It was very painful because, you know, I wrote things, I thought it was all important. She thought only about half of it was important. So it was brutal at times. And I wrote it in first person. and the editor wanted it all to be in second or third person. So I had to go back and rewrite it all in second and third person, which
Wow.
took a lot of time. She did a great job because she made me organize my thoughts. I have a tendency to just kind of go with what I'm thinking,
Sure.
saying and writing. But she made me organize it, and it's organized, I think, very well now. For each age level, there's a section on family life, school life, and social life.
Okay.
So as a parent, you can go to the middle school age and look, and your 13-year-old and see family life, school life, and social life. So I think that organization piece is good. And then there's a chapter on dealing with divorce, and there's one on anxiety and depression, and then there's some lists in the back.
That's great. Patricia, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. If people want to learn more about you, Patricia, where can they go find out more information about you and get the books, please?
On Amazon or on barnesandnoble.com.
And it's Steadfast Parenting again.
Yes, Steadfast Parenting, How to Raise Children of Character.
Beautiful. Thank you once again, Patricia.
Thank you for having me, Otto. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Take care.
Bye. You too.